Of all the things I've learned at Commonwealth, close reading has transformed me the most. I could talk about the patience and confidence it's given me, or how I can look at the same 5 lines of a poem about 100 times and magically still get something out of it. I think we all know that it's one of the most flexible, useful tools we learn here. But what I really want to talk about is something close reading has given me that I don't hear mentioned that often. For me, at least, it makes everything much more intensely, brilliantly beautiful. The idea that picking something apart completely can make it more interesting might be counterintuitive. Sometimes it doesn't work out. After teasing out so many different strands, all you're left with is a bunch of raggedy threads and a comment from your English teacher telling you that you made a lot of good observations, but didn't quite bring everything to a conclusion. Sometimes, however, you can make connections that blow your mind. This year, I'm reading the Aeneid in Latin 4. In this epic, Virgil plays with ideas from different ancient philosophies, and close reading revealed that there are particular words he uses to conjure up the ideas of these philosophies. Not to get too detailed, but Virgil specifically uses words that are associated with the random movement of atoms, which the Epicureans thought ruled the universe. He also uses the verb to roll a lot to suggest Epicureanism and the competing philosophy of Stoicism. For example, on one hand, Jupiter unrolls the scroll of fate and the plan of the universe, which is a Stoic idea. And on the other, Juno, who embodies the chaos and randomness of atomic motion, rolls waves of anger in her heart. I read Macbeth in 10th grade English and a pretty embarrassing number of times outside of school. And now it's probably my favorite work of literature. After reading Macbeth again this year, I noticed a particular passage that I had always thought of as one of those typical Shakespearean word salads. But when I read it this time, the way Macbeth addresses the witches in a certain scene immediately recalled for me that same swirl of atoms that is in the Aeneid. I thought that was amazing. The scene gained a new significance, and the universe of the play expanded. In English this year, we've been reading Paradise Lost. In a scene where Satan first rises from the burning lake, I noticed that the fires of hell are described in a way that, to me, was very reminiscent of the passage from Macbeth. Milton says, "On each hand the flames, driven backward, slope their pointing spires, and rolled in billows, leave in the midst a horrid veil." In Macbeth, Shakespeare also uses the word slope to describe pyramids collapsing. And, what's more, Milton uses that significant word from the Aeneid, rolled. It seemed to me that Milton had noticed, or even close read, the same things that I had in Macbeth, and had also connected it with the Aeneid. A line that I could have simply passed over was shown to actually have several layers of complex meaning. In these cases, close reading really revealed the intentions of the authors. I could see that there was a reason why they used this phrase or this simile instead of another. It wasn't merely mindlessly pretty or grand. A lot of things, like going through a museum or reading an epic poem, can get pretty deadly extremely quickly if you don't take the time to look at things and analyze them. I recently got back from a school trip to Italy. By our last day in Rome, we had been to an enormous number of churches and museums, and everyone was completely exhausted. One of the final ones we visited was the Borghese Gallery, and it could have been just another big blur of prettiness. Instead, it turned out to be my favorite museum of the entire trip. As we walked through the museum, my friends and I naturally began to do a close reading of the sculptures. Looking at them, I saw so many more details than I ever had before, and once I saw them, the statues became infinitely more affecting. 2 in particular stood out to me. The first sculpture is the Daphne and Apollo. As Apollo chases the nymph Daphne, her river god father turns her into a laurel tree to help her escape. The moment of transformation is so delicately captured, with the tiny leaves and the twirling fabric, is immediately arresting and beautiful, even if you don't close read it. But when I was there, I saw something that made it even more powerful. In Latin last year, I had read the story of Apollo and Daphne in Ovid's Metamorphoses, and looking at the sculpture, I noticed the placement of Apollo's hand on the part of Daphne that was covered in bark. It reminded me of a particular passage where, after Daphne becomes a tree, Apollo places his hands on the bark and can feel her heart still beating underneath. I got chills. The second sculpture is the Rape of Persephone. As with the Daphne and Apollo, you don't need to close read it to be amazed. The way Hades' hand sinks into Persephone as he lifts her is so perfectly rendered that it seems more real than real life. I looked at it for a long time and searched out all the little details. The way his hands have such an imprint on her body, whereas she lives almost none on him, the half-smile on his face, and the tear sculpted on hers. I thought about how Wordsworth and Aristotle both wrote that the most moving pieces of art are the ones that depict the most terrible scenes. I felt compelled to do something, but I didn't know what. Finally, I just started to cry. I'm not sure how well I myself can convey these feelings, so in true dorky Commonwealth style, I'd like to turn to Plato to try to explain myself. This is a passage from the Symposium, and Alcibiades is making a speech in praise of Socrates, and it immediately struck me because I knew exactly how Alcibiades felt. Truly, gentlemen, if I wouldn't seem to you absolutely drunk, I'd swear you an oath about what sort of things I've suffered from this man's words, and what I'm suffering even now. For whenever I hear him, I'm much worse than any wild fanatic. My heart races and tears flow. Listening to Pericles and other good orators, I judge they spoke well, but I've never felt anything like this, nor was my soul so assaulted. I don't know if anyone has ever found his inner matter, but I saw it once, and to me it seemed so divine and golden and fair and wondrous that I had to do what Socrates bade me. This is what I feel close reading has given me. I've listened to the other good orators and been moved, sort of, but close reading is like Socrates. It grabs me and shakes me up, and I notice things I never could have before. The world is suffused with beauty, and now I have the power to truly see it.